Hi, everyone. I'm Manissa, and this is Whale FM's Project Showcase. In this show, we talk with artists and projects in the NFT space, otherwise known as non-fungible tokens. My guests today are Alex Ness, aka Nessgraphics, and Audrey
Hello.
Au, co-founder of TR Labs. And in the next 15 minutes, we'll be delving into all of the questions about TR Labs and their art today. Nessgraphics is a 25-year-old digital artist who is known primarily for his mastery of 3D animation, modeling, and design. From the age of 12, Ness gravitated towards the use of technology to captivate his audience through digital storytelling at varying scale, showcasing visual art alongside award-winning musicians at globally prominent events and shows in the likes of Travis Scott, Diplo, and Imagine Dragons. Hi, guys. Thank you so much for coming on. And to start us off, Alex, I know this is your first time on here, and
Yes.
I'd love to hear a little bit all about your background and how you got into crypto and the NFT art space.
Yeah. So first off, it's funny. I've been in crypto a long time, longer
Mhm.
than most people I've chatted with. So I got into crypto in 2009, and I mined Bitcoin. I didn't keep any of it, but I mined about 1,000 of it and sold it. Sold an iMac on eBay for $300, which held 1,000 Bitcoin. So I've been in a long time, so I have all those stories. Which leads me towards around the same time as also when I started digital art. I started when I was 12, so this was a couple years before then, whatever the math is, whatever year that is. And along the way, I've just been a digital artist. And then when I saw NFTs, it was kind of my two loves combined, right? I've been in crypto and digital art the same amount of time. Um, and yeah, it just went from there. I got into NFTs about a year ago, I want to say. And it's just kind of been this crazy rabbit hole that I've been sucked down into. And it feels like the last year has been like 15 years pretty much. But it's been a fun time.
Absolutely. I feel like right now we kind of have this very healthy diversification of, OG crypto holders like yourself and essentially newer artists, right? And I think that it's just very exciting seeing this new dynamic change, and especially as we're moving into economy, which, a lot of people are now claiming as a passion economy. So, very excited to have you here, and I cannot wait to hear even more about your story.
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So again, now that we know who Nessgraphics is, let's give everyone a bit of context about what this new series is. So if this is your first time tuning in, Audrey, can you tell us a little bit about the AI 2021 project and its relation to TR Labs?
Oh, you're on mute.
Audrey, I think you're muted.
My technology. Yeah, for sure. So I think AI 2041 is a book that's co-written by Li Kai-fu and Stanley Chen, and it's 10 short fictional stories about AI. The author's team's approach to TR Lab in wanting to collaborate with digital artists who would be inspired by the book and create new artworks that are inspired by anything that they want to anything they want within the book. So we've been super fortunate and lucky to work with artists such as Blake Catherine, Ash Thorpe, Brendan Dawes, and we're also, I'm so excited to be talking with and working with Ness this week. And we also have a couple remaining exciting and awesome artists coming up. But within this, we really do let the artist take free reign of anything they want to be inspired by. And I would also love to hear a bit more actually about what Ness is inspired by this week. It's absolutely crazy how the artists all have taken the same book in so many different directions. And I love that it's all surrounding the topic of AI, which is becoming even more important, especially in the NFT space, when we do have a lot of bots and things like that flying around.
Absolutely. And I mean, this is really the first time that I've seen a platform take inspiration from a book and really letting the artist manifest and transform it into whatever they want to take shape, right? And I remember a couple days ago, I actually saw AI, 2041 at a bookstore, and I picked it up and I was like, oh my God, this is fascinating. And it's actually very exciting because this is a chapter, I know which chapter Ness chose, but of course I'm going to keep it a secret for now. I'm going to let Ness talk about it himself. But it's all about this like AI job displacement and what AI can't do and things like that. So I've always been a huge fan of AI, and I'm sure that a lot of people listening are too. So Ness, which chapter of AI 2041 did you choose, and what drew you to this chapter specifically?
Yeah, I forget exactly which chapter number. I think it was 7, I want to say. It was the quantum genocide one. And it just seemed like it was a lot of fun to make this piece. Kind of the chapter was about this unhinged like scientist who basically was creating this quantum computer for like revenge essentially. And I thought it would just be really fun to be like, what would the environment of his workshop, like, what would it look like, right? So we have this futuristic quantum computer in the front, which, funny enough, I started off the scene with like an actual quantum computer, like an actual model of what it would look like, and it just didn't feel right. It just felt too literal. So I went around it, went about it with this much more kind of artistic approach to be like, what would we see years from now if things evolve, this weird like giant orb thing in the middle of an old like aircraft hangar, and so on. So yeah, it was a lot of fun to be able to make something. How do I say this? So like with my art, a lot, half of it is trying to figure out like what the hell I want to make, you know, and that's a big process of it. For this, it was kind of, I already just had this story that fit my style already, that I could easily just sit down and make a piece that felt like it really went with the chapter. So this has definitely been one of my favorite projects that I've done because of that, of just having that kind of a prompt to start with.
Absolutely. I mean, it's fascinating that you chose this chapter, right? Because, I remember watching some videos like a couple months ago, and they were saying like quantum computers will destroy some of the cryptographic principles, but behind the blockchain, it's going to destroy the blockchain. So it's like it has this very ominous kind of look to it, and I feel like that was what you were trying to, trying to portray. It was this dystopian nightmare, and
Yeah,
it's yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I mean that's kind of spot on to what I try to make. I want to make things that how do I say it? Like, if you look at any of my art, I don't want you to kind of look at it and be happy, like it's not that kind of art. It should make you kind of feel unsettling a little bit or disgusted in a sense, like I always bring this up. There was this one tweet thread that I saw that was like, post your artwork and describe what your artwork would smell like, right? And the comments are all just people posting like drawings of whatever, or renders of literally anything, and they're like warm coffee in the morning, or like rose petals, and I commented mine and just said like moldy cream cheese is the smell of my art, right? So like I want that kind of gross unsettling feeling to my art. So this chapter fit it well, I think, because I bet that's exactly what this setting probably smells like.
Absolutely. I mean, it's funny because I was reading the descriptions or the notes from TR Labs, and they were like, "This is probably one of the most ominous, ominous pieces that is in the collection." And there's no glimpse of hope in this piece, which I guess is the exact feeling we're trying to go for.
Exactly. I mean that's spot on to the feelings that I try to do. Kind of like the whole series that I have, which this is part of it. It's called like the Neuralink series, right? And it kind of all is just based off of Elon Musk's Neuralink and kind of the negatives of what a society would look like if we're in this society where everything is just based on technology and no longer human in a sense. So yeah, it was very fitting to be making a piece that has absolutely no how do I say it? Yeah, no good ending, I guess.
Absolutely. I mean, I think what's interesting is that, like, just looking back at some of the, the common themes in the pieces, you kind of have this signature of like kind of making like a social commentary on what you think, you kind of, it's like a satirical play on what you think people's lives are, being a trader, you can see people are just having McDonald's, and then, maybe they're working, but they're trading, at night, or they're just, paying a lot of attention buying NFTs and things like that. So I guess, a lot of people think that, AI is going to push people into this realm where we just go deeper and deeper into technology, and we essentially just get more detached from reality. But I guess after reading chapter 7 and really, having your own manifest of this piece, what are your thoughts on AI?
I mean, I think AI is cool. I like, I'm trying to think of a way to describe it. I don't think we'll really get to a point where AI will take over everything, that people say like, oh, AI is going to put you out of a job, put you out of a job. It might, but I don't know. I just still think that human touch won't be replicated for a while. And at least everything currently AI created, you can really, if you look into it for more than like 15 seconds, you'll realize that it's not man-made. Like a good example is that program where it's like this person does not exist. You know, that one where it's pictures of people's faces that's AI created, but it's not a real person. And the people, they always look really good from a distance. Then you look up front and you'll like really close and you'll see like reflections don't match, right? If there's glasses, there might be one reflection, but the eyes have different, and so on. So yeah, I think AI is cool, but we shouldn't be too worried as artists yet.
Yes, let's not worry. Let's worry
Yeah,
until it happens. That's a
yeah,
happy-go-lucky
exactly.
mindset.
Yeah,
Exactly. And I guess just looking at this piece, something that I've always thought about is what is inside the quantum computer? You know, I see a lot of
yeah.
symbols on there. I see, you know, there's a lot of things going on, but what's inside?
Who knows? Probably some bat poop is definitely in there, and
Probably.
just yeah, and just just
Mhm.
whatever. Yeah,
Anything that you can imagine that kind of has that Ron cream cheese smell, basically.
yeah, definitely. Just disgustingness. You're probably going to get some kind of a disease. You need tetanus shots after, and so on. But yeah, definitely a lot of rust and
Absolutely.
bat poop.
Yeah, and I mean, just looking at the piece in itself, like before going to this interview, I was trying to zoom into the piece to try and find anything, you know, that you know, like Easter eggs or anything that I wouldn't otherwise notice at
Mhm.
first glance. And you know, just as part of my personal investment thesis, right? And I think for a lot of general collectors out there is right. It's like everyone wants to find pieces that you can see whether you can notice details that you wouldn't have just, you know, at a first glance. And I feel like you certainly have this, you know, in this piece, right? It's like even in the
Yeah.
corners of the pieces, you can always
Oh.
Oh no, I think we may have lost Anissa.
Oh no.
Yeah. Oh, well, no, but I mean, Ness,
Oh.
to continue on what she was asking, I'm a huge fan of the Easter eggs that you hide throughout your work.
Oh, she's back.
She's
There we
back.
go.
Yes, thank you, Audrey. Yeah, absolutely. So I just love to know a little bit about what Easter eggs you've kind of hidden in your pieces, and can you tell us a little bit about them?
Yeah, I mean, there's tons of Easter eggs in pretty much all the pieces. How do I say it? They're kind of just all over the place. I have a couple recurring themes. Like there's this one kind of graphic of a brain that I use a lot. That kind of is the you can see it right there. Um, that's kind of the I guess logo isn't the right word, but I'll use it. Kind of the logo of the Neuralink series, right? It's kind of what represents um, what it is in the whole Neuralink and so on. And yeah, just the Easter eggs are just me having fun. Usually, just putting in little. Sorry, I'm trying to get rid of this glare. um, of me just trying to have fun and put in these different Easter eggs for people to see. There's a mix of different like glyphs, kind of like that quantum kind of symbol. There's also like names of my collectors are in there too. You'll see, um, and just a bunch of just me having fun essentially, and trying to have these fun stories that go together. Like there's definitely Easter eggs between a bunch of the pieces that all relate to each other. Um, and it's just a fun game of having people um, zoom in there and have fun. Like with the GMGN piece I did a couple weeks ago, there was 69 editions and they were all different in some sense. That so and the main difference between them was the Easter eggs. So there was like a coffee cup, and each one had a different drawing on it. So people had a lot of fun of just going through and figuring out what the difference was between all of the pieces. So yeah, just having a lot of fun with the Easter eggs.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I feel like these themes are recurring of like kind of like this degen, the
Yeah.
gen theme. So yeah, I guess one thing I want to ask is like, what is your signature, or how do you, I guess, maintain like a consistent artistic voice, right? Because I know that that's very
Yeah.
important, especially when you're trying to maintain a brand as an artist.
I can't really hear you. The audio on the piece
No
is coming
problem.
through really loud. Hold
No
on. You
problem.
want to say what you say one more time?
Yeah, so kind of what is the how do you maintain like a consistent artist voice whenever you're creating pieces? So I know that is very
Yeah.
important for an artist to have a signature. What is your signature and how do you kind of create a brand around yourself?
I would say kind of my signature is again the feelings of what you're getting from the art, right? Um, sorry, let me just try to get rid of this bright ass glare.
I'm
Um,
experiencing the same thing.
I know. So I would say kind of the recurring bit of my art would be the coloring is one thing. I keep everything in that kind of this like very like, I don't know how to describe it. It's very green hued and kind of unsettling feeling. It's almost like if you walk into a hospital, how that there's usually really bright kind of blue tinted lights and it kind of makes you just feel unsettled. That's one thing I keep with a lot of my art. Again, another thing is just the overwhelming kind of overwhelming just amount of objects and kind of like sensory type things being thrown at you at once, so you'll look at it and there's just so many different things like flying at you. So those are, I'd say, are the two main things that really define my style. And I've noticed that I'm able to do a variety of different types of scenes. Like I'm doing outdoor scenes, I'm doing this kind of a scene, I'm doing close-up scenes as well. And all of them, if I just kind of keep those two main things of the unsettling amount of objects and overwhelming amount and the coloring, and those are the two main parts, I would say, to my style and consistency.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like with a lot of your pieces, right, with that much detail, you're really trying to have this constant stimulus at people, especially at
Yeah.
an age where, there's an abundance of art pieces now, and you really need to have, a few seconds to capture people's attention. It's those split second, responses where people are just like, okay, you know what, this is interesting. I think this is capturing my attention. I want to go into it. So, I guess it's like one thing that I do want to know as well is, I guess how long does it actually take for you to add so much detail to your pieces? I remember like watching
Yeah.
one of your Instagram stories and you said it was like it would take, from 4 to 5 days to maybe even weeks on end.
Yeah, so it really depends. One thing is, so a history about me that I didn't really talk much about. So I've been a digital artist since I was 12, and then in college around junior year, that's when Nessgraphics, right? That's when that formed. It was no longer kind of Alex Ness as an artist. It was Nessgraphics, and I started posting my art on Instagram, and I would just do dailies where I'd make a piece, post it, make a piece, post it. And from there, I got into the music industry, creating concert visuals for shows. And in that industry, we work incredibly fast. Like for Diplo for Coachella 2019, we had, I think, 5 weeks total where we did Coachella. I mean, we did Diplo, Sheck Wes, and Playboy Cardi, right? So 3 artists in 5 weeks. Diplo was headlining, and then Sheck Wes and Playboy Cardi were smaller. But in that time, it wasn't a big team either. There was a creative director, me as an animator, as a 3D animator, one other 3D animator who did not as much, and then a 2D animator. In that time, just for Diplo, I think I made 160 different animations, which were each like a unique scene.
Wow.
So coming from that world, I'm able to work super fast, right? And then Travis Scott for Astroworld tour, not festival. I wasn't involved in that, but Astroworld tour. It was, again, we had 3 weeks and I made like 120 different things. Ultimately, it was like 15 different songs that was used, but there was 120 different things. So again, from there, I can just work really fast. So I can kind of sit down and bang out most of a piece pretty quick. It takes me 1 to 2 days to get the bare bones of a piece and what would be probably considered done to most people. But that's where I start to have my fun after those 1 to 2 days when a scene is there, right? That's when I really start to do what I wasn't able to do with concerts, when I can actually sit down, I can make Easter eggs that are specific. I can really spend time placing different objects that aren't necessarily my typical Easter eggs of like the etching into tables and so on, like on the quantum computer. But I can do more of the Easter eggs of like different placed objects in the scene and really building a composition way more than I could in the music industry. So it's really hard to say how long a piece takes, because some of them I can finish in 3 days and it's like feels perfectly done, and then some I can spend a month on and it still doesn't feel done. So it's a wide range. I would say it's hard. Really depends on the piece.
I can imagine, and especially with so much detail, I feel like sometimes it's also hard to determine when to stop and when to
Yeah,
put more. Because sometimes
yeah.
I feel like if you put a bit more, then it's like, oh no, okay, now I need it, now the pieces, I feel like there needs to be something, else to balance out the composition.
Yeah, exactly. So it's this never-ending game because the composition is a huge part of it, especially even just Easter eggs, where it comes to just small details. If you put a bunch of etchings on a table, say in this part of the scene, and you have nothing over here, it'll feel weird, and your eye is just going to be over here, right? So you really need to do this big evening out of Easter eggs, and that's why again in this scene, if you look, the Easter eggs are all kind of in the center. There's almost no Easter eggs on the bottom or the top, and that was just to even it out. If I put too many Easter eggs on the bottom, it would make this big opening at the top feel really strange and not fitting, right? So it really draws your eye to that middle plane of the main object and the sides, um, which was just a one where again I just kind of determined when that end point would be, because I could go just crazier with this with Easter eggs and cover the bottom and end up covering the top, but I think at that point it would be way too overwhelming, like even more overwhelming than I want it to be, right? So it comes to this point where it's when do you consider it done, or when do you consider, even if it's not done, when do you consider putting more detail to be kind of counterproductive and take away from the artwork as well. So it's definitely a tough process to figure out and kind of get into your groove of how you want to work and so on.
Absolutely. I think with a lot of your pieces, just looking back at like previous pieces, a lot of them are kind of like a zoomed in kind of version of like, or magnified versions of, computer screens or like,
Yep.
laptops or notebooks. How come with this piece you decided to go with something that was rather, far, and it was, you kind of felt,
Yeah.
I guess in other pieces, you kind of felt like this small, tiny being, and you were going into this world with like large computers, everything was like magnified. Why
Yeah.
did it differ for this piece?
It felt so with a lot of the other artwork, when I want to do these close-up pieces, I want it to feel like you can sit down and it's kind of life-sized, if you
Mhm.
will, right? Like there's usually like a seat that's there that's empty where you could sit down and kind of think of yourself like, oh, I'm in the scene now,
Yeah.
right? With this piece, I didn't want that because it was very clearly it wasn't, the viewer was not like the protagonist, if you will, of
Mhm.
the artwork, right? The protagonist or antagonist, whatever you want to call it, of this piece is this unhinged scientist, and obviously the viewers aren't all these crazy people who want to kill everyone in the world, right? So
Right.
that was kind of part of it, right? To kind of disassociate the viewer from being in the artwork in that sense. And I also just wanted to create this large setting that would really go with the storyline, right? Of this story of this like this unhinged scientist creating this massive world altering type thing. It didn't feel right to just do this kind of small setting of just his desk, right? I'm
Mhm.
sure it could have worked, and I could have done it, but it didn't feel um, like it went with the story enough. The story definitely needed to be this bigger look at the entire massive scale of his workplace.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely can see that. I mean, it's interesting how a lot of your pieces are kind of like a POV, which I love.
Mhm.
But this one, I think it really just stands out from the other ones as well, just because it's so differing from like, other pieces that you've created.
Exactly. Yeah, that was, again, that was kind of the main purpose of it. To still keep it in my style and still make it like obviously part of my storyline. Like this isn't like out of the storyline a brand new piece, completely unrelated. It's still in the storyline, but it's just a bigger, a more wide view of the artwork. Definitely to keep that storyline going.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, go ahead.
Oh no, I actually Ness and Nisa, Ness, if you remember when I first saw a work in progress of the piece, I was like, oh my God, it's so crazy, it's so zoomed out.
Yeah.
Because and I actually love it because I think it adds a little bit to your worldview in a way that the desk images, as Anissa said, with the point of view, like now you're zooming out and now you're getting
Mhm.
an entire environment that is beyond the desk. And I also love how you kind of incorporated the desk and the chairs to the side. So it's almost like the viewer is taking a step back and seeing what they don't get to see, that's like within the artworks that has been released in the series already.
Exactly. Yeah. This piece also goes a lot with, I know I brought it up in the interview, but I didn't say what piece. But on my super rare, there's another piece called Wrecked. And this kind of goes along with that, where I use the same desk and computers on purpose to kind of keep that style, because that last piece was another kind of more open one, where it's from a different angle and we're more back. So I wanted to keep that in the same style to, again, keep in the storyline. And it was a fun way to kind of give a throwback reference to a previous piece. So yeah, that was a definitely on purpose to make it feel like you could maybe take all my artwork and kind of print them out, throw them on the ground, and kind of figure out a map between them of which are like directly related in timeline wise. So that was definitely a conscious thing that I did with that.
Absolutely. And I mean, just the concept of like a mad scientist alone, I'm sure that you had, some other references that you took to, even as a kid growing up, right? So
Yeah.
I guess, were you inspired by any movies or any music outside of the story? And what were some of your favorites?
I would say with this one, the only reference that I thought in my head was the most recent season of Westworld, the third season, how it had that big AI computer that was this massive sphere. I kind of had that in the back of my head as an idea that I liked. I remember watching that episode and seeing just the scale of it and this overwhelming aspect of it. I really liked that. So I would say that was really the only inspiration I used for this. For most of the time with my art, I don't use reference or much inspiration. It's usually just me sitting down and whatever's in my head. So at the same time, I didn't sit down and like go and Google a picture of it. I like to just use the images in my head and what I remember the scenes to be. Because I usually, how do I say this? Like if I'm watching a movie or a show and it has a scene that I like, I kind of remember it in my way, right? I remember like, how would I do it if I did that compared to what it literally is. That way, if I'm creating a piece of art that's mine, it's not just a copy or something, right? It's just like, how would I have done that? So I guess that would be the closest inspiration for this one, at least.
Absolutely. And in terms of a music point of view, I know that you create your music for essentially all of your art pieces, right? Like, where did you draw that inspiration from?
So I don't actually make the art
Okay.
personally. I'm not a musician. It's just a matter of finding the right royalty-free music that I have the rights to. But this one, I wanted this very ominous feel of the art, and just kind of, how do I say it? Like, I wanted you to be a little unsettling from it, kind of work you up. I kind of used a beat that kind of emulated a heartbeat a little bit, of what you might feel if you open up like a door to this place and realize like you opened up the wrong door and you're probably going to get killed by security or something, right? So that was kind of the idea behind that.
Absolutely. It's very fascinating seeing like how you drew your inspiration from. And I guess like, a lot of artists, I don't know if you've ever, experienced it, but a lot of artists they also experience some sort of creation blocks. So how do you
Yeah.
kind of get over that, after you kind of like identify the emerging trends, you've already, kind of displayed them or showcased them. How do you get over that creation block and actually create even more work?
It's tough. I deal with that on a daily basis. So I don't really have an exact answer. I wish I did, because it would be helping me a lot and I would be making more art. But I kind of, I guess what I do the most to get over it is I try not to think too much into it. If I'm not feeling like making art and I'm in this crazy kind of a rut, right? I usually just do anything but make art. I just go and watch TV and just relax all day, or I go and drive my car around and just do anything besides art. And because of that, I usually end up getting these little random ideas that I turn into something much bigger. Like the kill screen piece that I did that was released at Sotheby's, that was just an idea of, I think I was on a road trip, right, with my girlfriend and our dog. We were on a cross country road trip, and halfway through it, I got a message from Steve Aoki who said like, "Hey, do you want to be included in this? I'm curating." And I was like, "Yeah, of course. I don't have a piece of art yet, and I'm away." And I come home. They said I needed to have the artwork done by the 10th. I think it was August 10th, or September 10th, whatever it was. And I would be home from my vacation on like the 3rd. So I had almost no time to make the artwork, but I had this big chunk of time to actually think of it. And if I remember correctly, we were driving through this kind of just this weird town, and there was like an arcade or something. And just seeing the arcade not being at a computer, that's what kind of triggered my mind to think, hey, it could be cool to do an arcade related like gaming piece, and what would it look like if some biohacker or whatever used that as like a system for this technology or whatever that's in all my pieces, right? So just getting out there and not thinking about art is what I found the best way to create new pieces and get inspiration, because I find you get inspiration in the weirdest places. Because I'm pretty sure for this piece, I think we were at this point, we did this big giant road trip across the country. I think we were in the middle of like nowhere in like Idaho or something, and there was like nothing around except this weird old arcade, and just driving past that in a town where I'd never thought I would get any inspiration. And I did, and it was for the Sotheby's piece. So
Absolutely. And I guess in terms of like your technique as well as like what inspirations that has, has there any art movement or any particular artist, in and out of the space has it inspired you in your technique that, made you evolve or
yeah.
into it? But I guess
I mean, I'm trying to think. I think there are in the back of my head. I don't try to like, if I'm making a piece of art, I don't go and look at other artists for inspiration. I never want to do that. But from looking at artists like throughout time, my favorite artists like Ash Thorpe is probably one of my favorites. Who, funny enough, he was part of this project. He's one of my like all-time favorite artists, and I get inspiration from him. I would say he's kind of the number one where it comes to it. Also, Raoul Marx is another one who's kind of an all-time favorite artist, where I found myself looking at a lot of his art years ago when I was in college and trying to recreate it and kind of build from there.
absolutely. And I guess, with just a word of advice for some artists coming in out of space, what advice would you give them if they want to start as an NFT artist?
How do I say it? It's tough. So I'll say kind of my story of how I like what I did when I got into NFTs. So I came into NFTs in November of 2020 is when I posted my first piece on Super Rare. And coming from already a decently successful artist working in the music industry and having a following and so on, I figured, okay, I'll probably sell my piece for something, right? Because I saw kind of all this other art that some of it was like really bad and it's selling. So I jumped in that first piece, and it did basically nothing. And I was like, what am I doing wrong? And then from there, that's when I really figured out like, okay, there's a big part of this that is way more than the art. It's about relationships between collectors and so on. So from there, I went about it differently, and I started being like, okay, let me just make connections with different collectors and kind of decide who's going to collect my art, and let them get it for whatever. It doesn't matter, like the price. So like Tim, illustrator, he ended up, I think, getting 4 of my one-of-ones in the beginning for pretty cheap, like 1 ETH for the most part across the board. And that's because we just made a connection. We started talking because he, if I remember, his bio was on Instagram where we met. It was something about changing the music industry because he has this music streaming app that he made. And because of that, I kind of reached out, and we were just talking about that first before he even knew that I was like releasing NFTs. So just making these connections with people. And then when someone does want to collect your art, don't worry about the price in the beginning, at least, right? Like, just let somebody collect your art for whatever they feel it's worth or whatever they're willing to pay. And don't try to go crazy and say, oh, I think you could pay more just because you're rich or something like that. I've heard a lot of that. People saying like, so-and-so is a billionaire or something, but they're only giving me this much for my art. Like, who cares? Just let them get it in the beginning, make connections with collectors and be friends with them. Don't think of collectors as just like chunks of money, you know, because they're not. And go from there, and then you'll end up being successful, likely. And also the coolest part of that, I think, is those friends that you make in the beginning, if you do it right, they end up having like very expensive pieces later on, right? Like Tim, who invested again, like in the beginning, like $5,000 total among a couple pieces, now has 4 one-of-ones of mine, I believe, which could be valued at anything else crazy, you know, and that's just because I made those connections in the beginning. So I think that's the coolest part of this. It's just that. Hopefully I explained that kind of well.
No, absolutely. I think it's extremely important to have a relationship with your collector. And again, it's like what role a collector plays in actually art collecting, right? It's actually supporting the artist's career. And, having, to do that, you need to get to know the artist, you need to understand their creation process, etc. So it's definitely very important.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's by far the most important thing of this. And also I kind of already understood that coming into here because I kind of come from like an artsy family. My dad's an architect and my sister's a fine artist, a painter, and she's been in the traditional art world and having her pieces at major art galleries and auction houses and so on. So I kind of already understood how the traditional art field works and how it works with collecting compared to just me being like a commercial artist where I make work for like music, right? I already understood a bit of how that worked and the really important part of connections. And another thing that I also, excuse me, that I brought into NFTs with me is the fact that in the traditional art world, even if you have a lot of money, you can't necessarily buy the art you want, right? If a gallery or whoever doesn't want to sell you the art, even if you're the richest person ever, if you have a track record of say like flipping art really fast in the traditional art world, you're not going to be able to buy art from galleries, right? So coming into it with that sense too in NFTs and making it very difficult to get my art, even if you're super rich, right? Like you can't necessarily just easily get my art. So that's another thing that I did again, where it's like that connection between collectors and making sure it's never kind of like a blind transaction, right? Like that I never want my art just to feel like a purely business transaction where like you're giving me money and I'm giving you art and that's it, right? I always want it way more than that.
Absolutely. I mean, even just as a collector, art collector myself, right? I think that one of the things that I definitely look at too is, how can this artist kind of transcend their work into the physical too? You mentioned how your family had a background in traditional art, and I feel like, a big proponent for me is really understanding why is this, what is the value proposition of this artist and why are they going digital? So I guess, I know you've worked on so many massive scale pieces. Do you think that you would ever go into the immersiveness side or the physical side?
Yeah, I'm actually, so I can't talk about it.
Okay.
But I want to do stuff like that. So there might end up being some cool little physical sculptures or something. And I might also do some big immersive things. So we'll see.
I cannot wait.
Just can't talk about it. Can't talk about it, but
no problem. No problem.
Yeah.
We're trying to nudge it out of you. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, since you came into the NFT space, and I know you were like an OG crypto holder, right? So how has your art evolved over time, and in what ways did it take shape?
I would say it evolved the most with NFTs because I finally have time now to make art for myself, right? I'm not just sitting down and having a creative director who are usually like, I'm best friends with most of the creative directors I work with on these projects in the music industry. So it's not like a weird situation to work for someone, but still at the end of the day, even the creative director, they're not creating their vision. It's still ultimately the client's vision, right? And we could do whatever we want that we think is amazing, but if the client doesn't like it and just shows up to rehearsals and says, fuck this shit, I want something else, then it changes. And that happens all the time in music industry. We could spend weeks on something and then the client just had a bad day and he decides he doesn't like anything he sees, you know, so we change it. And in NFTs, there's zero of that. I'm that person. I'm the creator and I'm also essentially the client in a sense. So I just make whatever I want to make and no one else is interfering in it. So that's the coolest part. And because of that, I've been able to really dive into this specific style of this kind of cyberpunk dystopian feeling, because I can, you know, I don't have to worry about other styles that maybe I don't want to make. I just make what I want to make. So that's been the coolest part and of being able to just do anything I want.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of people kind of have this preconceived notion that artists or NFT artists specifically work with a huge team, but a lot of the time it's really just a one-man team. And that's why I call
Yeah.
artists in the NFT space entrepreneurs, because essentially what you're doing is you need to deal with the marketing, you need to deal with your own prompts, ideas, collector relations on top of creating art. So I guess one of the next question I want to ask you, and I feel like this has kind of been like a long time debate in the NFT art space, is how do you deal with scarcity and abundance?
So two things. Yeah. I mean, I'm a one person team. I'm everything. There's no one else in Nessgraphics. I'm my own management. I do everything. When I do a drop, we were talking about this before, when I do a drop, I'm going through and making sure there's no bots entering and so on. So it's a lot of work. As for scarcity and abundance, again, that's coming into NFTs with already knowing the traditional art field, right? And knowing that that's like basically the number one thing you need to worry about is how many things you're releasing and to be careful, right? It's far easier in the traditional art field because if you make a painting, it's one painting, right? Or if you make a print, you can usually only print it so many times. If you make it like say a lithograph or something like that, you can't just endlessly print it unless it's digital, because the print is just going to decay and it's going to end up looking bad. So you only want to do it that certain amount of times. And because of that, you have actual scarcity, right? And you also get that clear definition between pieces, you know, like you have a painting that's like massive. Like my sister does paintings that are like 15 feet wide, right? You know, that's a 15-foot wide painting. And you know, a print is a print, right? And in the NFTs, you don't have that. You look at a one of one and you have an edition. And at a first glance, you don't know that one is a one of one and one is an edition. We don't have a clear way of saying like, what's a digital poster, right? You hear that a lot with open editions. And since we don't have those big differing things of actually showing the variation, that's why I'm not doing open editions and I'm not doing really big editions and so on, because you no longer have scarcity on your side, because as of right now, it does have to be kind of technically artificial scarcity, right? Because again, you can't clearly define the difference. So that's a big part of everything I think about is trying to say, how can I imagine this piece being a physical print, right? Like I could only print this so many times, so I have to do the same for this. I can only paint so many paintings in a year, right? I'm going to do the same. I'm not going to just take like if you make a big 15-foot painting, you can't just say, oh, I have this old painting that I made 10 years ago, right? That is like this big. I'm going to go sell that as a 15-foot wide painting. You can't do that, right? So that's the same reason why I generally don't create like sell old artwork, you know? Yeah, it's the kind of this, I could go on for days about this subject, but it's definitely something I think a lot about.
Absolutely. And I think that's also why the reason why a lot of your pieces are kind of one-on-one editions instead of just, open editions, as you said, right?
Yeah.
I think that people at the start maybe had an initial interest in it just because, there would be a wider collection base. But at the same time, I think with, collectors, you really want to have the same loyal fan base, right? So it's like it's focusing more on the 1% rather than just, everyone. And that's why I feel like TR Lab has like such a curatorial, kind of artist base, right? To ensure that there's quality and that even the collectors are also quality investors.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anyone who could be called loyal fans, Ness's fans are absolutely batshit crazy.
They are batshit crazy.
Yeah, it's insane. It's insane how much, how many DMs our mod team has gone of everyone, trying to figure out our secret code for this week and for questions about our whitelist application. I do want to add, I think, Anissa, Ness mentioned that he spends a lot of time on managing his community. I really think that there's no artist that does it better. It's absolutely insane how much Ness thinks about his community. The fact that some of his collectors' names are hidden as Easter eggs in his work, and the fact that like people really, really love being an owner of his work and being so proud of it. For Ness's whitelist, I actually tried to apply to the GMGN one myself, and it's insane how much people it's insane how much time and effort Ness put into ensuring that all the collectors who do win the piece are winning it in a fair and right way, and that they're not bots. And for us this time around, for our whitelist mechanisms, like we are actually really inspired by what Ness has done as well, and so we also definitely relied on Ness for advice and how to make the whitelist mechanism better. As he says, who collects your work is sometimes more important than whether your work sells out or the price of your work. It's the relationship that matters the most.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we did a bunch of stuff this week. Like another thing is the whole fact that like some people were confused, like, why do I have to have a wallet that has 1 ETH? It's because it shows you're not a bot, right? Like it's harder to have like 30 bot accounts that all have 1 ETH in it, and then you have like your thousands and thousands of dollars to try to get a piece. I'm sure some people will do that and whatever, but it's just all these deterrents to stop people. Because again, that was the big thing that I had when I did it. I just had so many people who ended up just entering with a bunch of blank addresses, and then I had one person won, and then it was a blank address, and I just kind of knew, and I was like, all right, let me watch this, and then it ended up just being funded by an account that also entered the drawing. So it was like, oh yeah, you're obviously a bot. So all these things I've just kind of learned to figure out the best ways to determine who's a bot, who's not. I mean, it's still hard. There's people still get through, but it's definitely a very important thing, because I think that's just important to try to make sure art goes to real people, and yeah, because if you get a couple botters that all get your piece, most of the time botters, they don't give a shit about the art, right? They just want to make a profit right away. So they're going to end up listing it right away. And usually if you have like 4 or 5 botters that got it, they're just going to outlist each other to the bottom, so it just creates this other artificial pricing in the negative sense of these people who just don't care about the art. So it's definitely super important.
Absolutely. I mean, it's amazing to see how hands-on you are with your community, especially seeing, a lot of artists, maybe they feel like, nobody's really going to talk about it or nobody's really going to communicate. So I think it's a waste of time talking to community. And that's really the wrong mindset to it, right? And I think a problem with a lot of marketplaces at the start, right, when NFTs were still in a very, in its very earliest stages, a lot of people were using bots to game the system. And so if artists really wants to reward active contributors and your loyal fan base, it's important making sure that the people who purchase their pieces actually believe in the artist's career rather than just trying to make a quick buck, because there's a lot of money to be made in this space, right?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, one good example is the keys that I did, right? So the first plan behind the keys was I had a nifty drop in August, and I wanted to give a chance for collectors who were either my early collectors, for the most part, that bought way before I was on Nifty. Most of the editions they had were like Maker's Place, or they had one of ones, right? I wanted them to have an option to get into my collectors only part of Nifty. So basically, I airdropped these keys to the early collectors essentially before then. And because of that, a couple people who were they were kind of like serial flippers of my art. They got the keys, but they just sold them right away, right?
Mhm.
And so because of that, they sold them for like between 3,000 to 7,000. I want to say was kind of like the range of people who flipped them right away. And now, if you again see the price now, they're selling for $62,000. So because of that, because of it, me giving out this key, which didn't clearly say there is a utility yet. Well, it kind of emphasis on it, but I didn't give like clear usage of what these keys were going to be. It gave a chance for it to switch hands to people who cared, and look at it now. So I think that's definitely a big part of it.
Absolutely. I think, as crude as it might sound, I feel like it's very similar to kind of like investing, right? Or even just stock investing, right? It's like, you want to let the winners win, but you also want to cut the losers short. It's the same thing. You want people to actually who believe and who know that, the artist or the project has strong fundamentals and actually holding on to it so that you know that the investors are the correct investors.
Exactly. Yeah. Especially like I'm never like some people, they message me if they're gonna sell my art and they're like sorry about selling my art, and they end up selling it for like 15x or something. I'm like, you never have to be sorry for that. Like I don't like, obviously I want you guys to sell the art. But these keys were a good example because it was like, I'm giving you a free thing for owning my art, and then they just immediately sold it right away for whatever offer they could get. So that was kind of a very easy way for me to weed through people as well. I mean, of course, some of the people who sold it in the beginning were people who were collectors and just needed some liquidity, and a good amount of them, actually, I think there was 2 of them that ended up selling the keys, and then like a day or so later figured out like, oh shit, I should probably have this key, and they just bought it back, right? So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that we're having this conversation because I know that this is a very important discussion to have because a lot of people, we don't have enough discussion about the importance
Yeah.
between the collector and the artist, right? And it's like a lot of people, again, they still try to make a quick buck. They still trying to flip right immediately after, an artist launches. So it's amazing with the new mechanics you guys are coming up to essentially ensure that people are not bots and that we are actually, rewarding active contributors. So huge
Yeah,
props to that.
I think also a lot of people are kind of like scared to talk about this.
Yeah.
To be honest, that it's kind of like the elephant in the room or the bat in the room that people don't want to talk about.
It's absolutely the bat in the room. I mean, again, before we do end off this interview, I do want to give a huge props to TR Lab for doing a behind the scenes page. I haven't seen this with any, NFT marketplaces so far. So Audrey, I'd love for you to give us, a brief kind of, description of, what was the thought process behind adding the behind the scenes and really giving people a chance to understand the artist.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for us, as you know, we want to be curated, and we are never going to have. We're always going to be very careful, just as Ness was selecting his collectors, with selecting the artists that come onto our platform, and with such great artists such as Ness coming on, we really want to highlight who they are and their behind the scenes and how they're thinking about the work, even more so than just. I think a lot of times in the NFT space, I do think that people only do focus on the price. They don't think about the work that the artist is putting in. They don't focus on the Easter eggs, the details of the work, or what the artist has done and how this work is placed in relation with the artist's series. I myself come from an traditional art collecting background, and I've never sold any of the art or any of the NFTs that I've collected. And so when I really look at an NFT that I want to collect, I'm really thinking about the aesthetics. I'm thinking about whether I align with the artist's vision long term and whether I believe in their future. And also huge props to our incredible design and tech team for putting these pages together. I really love how they turned out, and I really love how they highlight and allow us to add in process images and tier lab notes about the artist. But the whole point of us doing this is to really shift the focus back onto the art and the artist rather than just the price point of when artwork has sold.
Absolutely. And I think that's a perfect answer. Thank you so much, Audrey. And guys, I know that we are nearing the 60-minute mark. I could continue this conversation forever and I'm having so much fun, but I will be ending off with one question. And this is to the both of you. Where do you guys see NFTs going in the next 10 years? Loaded
That's
question.
tough. That's tough. Yeah. It's tough. If I knew, I would probably not tell people because then I would become a billionaire. But but I mean, I think it's just gonna keep going. I think we've kind of hit this point where you can't really turn back, right? That being said, I do think we're gonna see like a huge NFT crash, especially these just endless profile picture projects. Like every day there's a new project, and half of them, if you look at them, it's very clear that it's like the same team behind it. The art styles are so similar, and you can only like it's hard to have the same exact style like done without it being obvious, you know. So I think a lot of that's going to crash, and I think we're just going to keep seeing this kind of how do I say it, like NFTs will evolve with time. We're gonna see a couple more of these different type of bubbles, right? Of these profile picture bubbles. Who knows what the next bubble will be? But or bigger than that, I think NFTs are this thing that, again, like the technology, it's kind of like bubble proof, right? Because like how are you gonna not have a digital proof of authenticity? Because at the end of the day, that's all NFTs are. It's just a way to show like, yes, you own this digital piece of art. So we can't go back on that. But as for 10 years of what's going to be different and what's going to be like the in thing, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, 10 years is crazy. I don't even know where I'm going to be in a year. So
Yeah.
to answer that for a whole space, I think my answer is probably more slanted towards the NFT art space. I think, you know, there's collectibles, there's gamify. But for me, I really do believe in the future of digital art. And I think right now the market is super hot. There's a lot of speculation going on. And there are a lot of people who are buying in to flip. They only care about the price. They don't care about the artwork or the artists. And yeah, my thesis is that people are getting bored of everything coming into the market. Where, you know, if a couple months ago, if you were a big celebrity coming into the space, that was it. That would get you a lot of news. But now the space is so oversaturated that I think quality digital art pieces, such as Ness's, all of Ness's pieces, will really stand out and really hold their long-term value over time. And I believe that people are also looking for more innovative mechanisms, more innovative art, and more innovative ways to collect. So that will probably mature in the space. But I think a lot of what I'm saying will probably happen in a year or two, given how fast the space runs. I really don't know what it's going to be like in 10 years. But I think if I had to sum up what I believe is, I really do believe in the value of the future of digital art and lens of NFT.
Absolutely. I think maybe in the next 10 to, 15 years, I think that any form of digital assets is going to be having some type of non-fungible technology running in the background, whether that be in music, whether that be in art, or really any type of assets. So, you know, welcome to the new digital age. So it's going to
Yeah.
be fascinating because I really want and I really hope that a lot of investors here listening to are, going to be investing in assets that are going to continue to accrue value over our lifetimes and even over our lifetimes, not just, in the next couple of years, which is, what we're seeing a lot of the times in this space. But again, I think that is amazing, discussion that we're having. But unfortunately, we are reaching that 1 hour mark. But before that, just to let you guys know, there is 1 hour. You guys have 59 minutes until the end of the whitelist raffles. So be sure to sign up if you haven't already. Guys, would you guys like to give any more details about the drop before we end off? And could you guys give us your Twitter handles or some of your socials if they would like to keep up with you guys?
I mean,
for me, just search Nessgraphics. You'll find me.
for me, Chair Lab with an underscore on Twitter. But I just want to wish everyone the best of luck with the raffle. I think it's going to be quite competitive, like a lot of other Ness's drops. And yeah, may the force be with you for this one.
Definitely.
May the force be with you guys. Awesome. Well, guys, again, thank you so much for joining us, and I cannot wait to have you guys up here with Will FM again.
Amazing. Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much
having
for having us, Anissa.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, guys. Thank you.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.